Well, so that's the big argument between Elections Alberta and I, because they're claiming that the activities that I was participating in were elections advertising, and I'm saying that they weren't elections advertising, that they're protected under my charter rights of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, that sort of thing. And like, for example, unions have meetings all the time, right? And in those meetings, they have political discussions and they tell people what to do politically all the time. Like, this is
That's
very
almost all they
common.
do now. Yeah.
That's almost all they do. They're a political arm of socialism, we'll call it, and and so my argument has always been that we're not promoting a political party. In fact, if you listen to my speeches, I often am way harder on the United Conservative Party than I am on the NDP. And I was very against the premier and leader of the United Conservative Party, Jason Kenney. My group has always been an advocacy group for democratic involvement in politics. That's what it's about, getting as many people as possible involved, because I believe that competition is the source of creating merit. So the more people you have involved and the more competition there is, the better the outcome you're going to have. The more, I believe that in the markets, I believe that in
As
politics.
long as the process is an actual, honest, democratic
Yes.
process, then yes.
And that and
Transparent.
that's what I believe in. That's kind of my core, let's call it civic value, is our people need to be involved, and they can't become just discouraged because of corruption, because that's exactly what the corrupt want. The corrupt want them not to be involved because they say, well, it's corrupt, so why would you even be involved? And then they aren't involved, and it's easier to do corruption, right? So that my thesis is, don't let corruption be the thing that stops you from being involved. Get more involved. Double down, double down, double down.
Was David Parker of Take Back Alberta, who has been seemingly targeted by Elections Alberta for exercising his charter rights because his views do not align with the ongoing cultural Marxist narrative propagated by nearly all levels of government across Canada. Welcome to Occam's Razor. Please like, share, subscribe, and see the links down below in the comments for my Substack and other channels, including my new gardening, cooking, and canning channel just launched yesterday. If you have any story tips, please leave them down below. And if you'd like to tip me, there's a link down below for that as well. Now, on Sundays, I usually go through and check Vlad Tepes, who is located in Ottawa. And I was looking at this story from yesterday, where it says Alberta political organizer fined over 135K for election interference by Daniel Smith's admin. Hmm. So let's go through that story today. Those of you who held out hope that Alberta would be a place where liberty-minded Canadians could move to in order to escape the destruction and deracination Carney is manufacturing for us may find this interview distressing. So the interview is linked over at Rare Foundation. Now, Rare Foundation is Rise, Aligned, Ignite, Reclaim. It's a grassroots activist organization comprised of everyday Americans leading a movement to reclaim our republic from the network of individuals and organizations waging war on Americans, our Constitution, our borders, and Judeo-Christian values. So Vlad um, does interviews for Rare on a regular basis, although Vlad, of course, is Canadian. And it was a good interview. And it was as a result of this recent fine. So when David Parker announced that he had been served another $20,000 fine by Elections Alberta for his crime of hosting Jordan Peterson in Red Deer during the election period of 2023. So, of course, it's rather concerning. It does sound like free speech is under attack. And if you go through, there'll be a couple more clips. Well, I suggest you go through and check the links out and look at the interview. You will see there's some very specific targeting going on here. Now, let's just go through a couple of the paragraphs here associated, the article that's associated with the interview itself. There'll be a link for this one as well. I suggest you go down and read the rest of it. Alberta's freedom movement just took another massive hit. Conservative activist David Parker has been slapped with an outrageous fine for allegedly election interference. Why? Because he dared to bring Jordan Peterson to speak during the campaign season. In an exclusive interview with Rare Foundation USA, Parker laid out the shocking details of how his involvement with Jordan Peterson's speaking event led to unprecedented fine. Despite Peterson's remarks being within his legal rights, Alberta authorities chose to enforce vague and selectively applying election laws against Parker. For those who saw Alberta Premier Daniel Smith as a beacon of freedom and political hope, this revelation is a crushing blow. Parker, an experienced political and conservative activist, was fined an enormous sum of money, not just personally, but through his podcast and organization as well. His crime? Hosting a talk where Peterson expressed disdain for Alberta's far-left extremist NDP leader, Rachel Notley. Though Peterson was not brought to Alberta specifically to discuss the election, he did mention that he disliked Notley, a statement well within his legal rights. Yet Alberta chose to enforce vague and selectively applied election laws against Parker. Let's watch the next clip.
The Canadian federal election played a big role. My fines aren't connected to the work that Take Back Alberta did. So the way the fines are broken down is I personally have been fined $7,500. Take Back Alberta has been fined $112,500. And now one of my companies that I formerly did a podcast through called Z Media, some people will know that podcast. It was called The Canadian Story. And that company was just fined yesterday $20,000. So they have done everything in their power to silence me and to silence the movement that is being built in Alberta.
Election Alberta that levied these fines. So I guess I have two questions about that. Would you say that Elections Alberta as an organization is what people would in casual conversation refer to as deep state?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yes.
Okay. Is it possible that the current premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, would be able to go in? I mean, does she have? Is it under kind of an executive branch where she could say, you know what, these guys are not. We're going to swap them out, the leadership, and we're going to fix this.
Well, they already did it to AHS, right? AHS was exposing some serious corruption that was going on.
That's Alberta Health Services, right?
Alberta Health Services. They received a letter about some serious corruption that's going on under Danielle Smith's government, right? And so instead of accepting that letter, the government fired the entire board and the CEO, and that's going through the courts right now. So they have the power not just to fire the elections commissioner, but they could fire everybody in the election commissioner's office and replace them if they wanted to. They're the ones using Elections Alberta to silence me. This is not Danielle Smith is not my friend at this point. She's very upset with me trying to hold people accountable. I'm very upset about the corruption that is occurring under her leadership. Whether she's directly responsible for it or whether it's just being allowed to happen is something that we can debate because no one can actually really know that. But I think as more and more of the corruption and just money funneling, straight money funneling, contracts that are being sole sourced, way overcharged, just that alone, which is happening and being exposed in the Alberta media, is enough for me to say I'm not going to be supportive of this woman's leadership anymore. And they know that, and so they're using every tool at their disposal to silence and punish me.
We all know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And a little bit of power in the wrong hands with people with loose morals and no ethics will probably take advantage of it. And that is why the message that Peter has been saying is for people to get more involved. Because the more of us that are involved, the less these miscreants can manipulate the system for their advantage or their advantage of their friends, as has been happening. Good example is how many people actually vote for a party leader who then eventually becomes the leader of the province or the country. It's a very small fraction of Canadians that actually get involved. And we also look at how many people actually voted in the last election. Well, we had a slight little increase, but still close to 35% of Canadians did not vote federally. And why is that? Because I think maybe perhaps it's for a misplaced faith in an election system that we think is still uncorruptible. But that is not what he believes.
So I started a campaign called Cheer Must Go. So that was the first time I, as let's call it a foot soldier, rose and said, no, we need to, our leadership is bad. Over the course of the last 6 years, I've dived deeply into the corruption of the conservative movement. And I don't want to like be just a naysayer and say all conservatives are like all conservative politicians are corrupt or anything like that. But the system's corrupt. And the system is corrupt because nobody's involved in it. So what I did was I traveled around Alberta during January, February, March, and April of 2022, and I did meetings every night, and I just simply told people that if you want to know why your society looks the way that it does, it's because of you.
So let's do a run through of the coverage in the mainstream media and independent media and see where the differences are and see if some of the messaging that he is talking about that has been corrupted bureaucratically and mainstream wise is there. Let's go first to Press Progress, a notoriously far left publication, and they do this very easily if you just look at how they write their stuff. Here we have TBA, referring to Take Alberta Back or Take Back Alberta, is a right-wing group that has been training scrutineers to infiltrate campaigns and act as security on election day. They are advising volunteers on how to minimize the cheating on election day. Well, that's a very interesting far-left narrative you have there, Press Progress, because scrutineers are something that we actually need in Canada. In fact, there were a lot of scrutineers in this last federal election. And apparently, the most difficult thing for scrutineers is actually making them available when they do recounts, because everyone's volunteering throughout the whole election and right up to the election and the evening. And then after that, everyone just wants to go home. They've done their volunteer work. But in some writings, as we know, they're pushing more recounts. That's where you need scrutineers again. Scrutineers is not a politically motivated thing. It should never be. To want to reinforce your democracy, the very fact that these cultural Marxists think that a scrutineer is far right tells you everything you need to know about these communists and their publications. Let's look at The Orchard, a little independent publication. The account of what he's being accused of is coming from Parker himself, who is not exactly a reliable narrator, with his penchant for conspiracy theorizing. Ah, yes, the old call of the far left. If you say anything that threatens their situation or their ideology or their narrative, you are a conspiracy narrative. Imagine how many conspiracy narrations over the past 5 years have all become true. In fact, there's only one thing that is a conspiracy, and that's when you engage yourself with another human being to go out of your way to deceive people. And in fact, these publications here are the ones who are involved in conspiracies because they continually push the controlled narrative as opposed to pushing the truth, making them the actual real conspiracy nuts. According to Elections Financing and Contribution Disclosures Act, election advertising includes organizing events where a significant purpose of the event is to promote or oppose a registered party or registered candidates. That's crazy talk, because you could apply that to almost anybody saying anything during an election. Why don't they apply this to far left mainstream media, who, with their obvious bias on the news events that they hold, demonizing a specific party while elevating another is in fact election interference, but not so for these bureaucrats, because it's not the kind of election interference that they are concerned about. They are only concerned about election interference that impedes their political narrative. So it's obvious that Alberta elections seems to be displaying a rather specific bias by going strictly after this man. Donations to a third-party advertiser such as TVA are supposed to be spent on advertising, but Parker in Elections Alberta has also accused him of enriching himself off those donations. He claimed he has the receipts to prove this isn't the case. Of course, I'm providing all the links to these articles down below. If you want to know more, I suggest you go in and get into the depth of these things. But as you can see, there's always a narrative. And people who are paying these publications to put this out, like Press Progress, which is being funded by the Liberal Party of Canada through the Media Fund, paying them to push a specific narrative. All right, let's go to the Globe and Pale. Ah, yes, the ultimate far-left publication in Canada, as opposed to a far-left communist rag like the Red Star of Toronto. This guy here, Gary Mason. What did you say? Ah, yes. Consequently, no one was truly surprised when she, referring to Daniel Smith, shared a stage with American commentator Tucker Carlson in January. Most politicians in Canada wouldn't have been caught dead with the man, given his abhorrent commentary on everything from immigrants to Vladimir Putin. The premier was also photographed with fellow event speakers and conservative provocateurs like Jordan Peterson and Conrad Black. Ah, yes. If only the detritus that these people shovel out would also apply to them. Why, what he's saying right here is that typically, if you're even in the same room with someone that they disapprove of, their nastiness is automatically imbued upon you, and you shall now forever be associated with them, even though that most of the times when they feel some disparagement towards somebody that they are associating with, in this case, the Premier of Alberta, they never explain why they are bad. They just are. It's that combination of the binary thinking of the far left, where if something is branded bad, as in Trump derangement syndrome or Elon Musk derangement syndrome, or whatever derangement syndrome of the day is, it shall be bad and forever shall be bad until the next current thing moves me to another bad thing that I need to be mad about. That is the mind of the leftist. And they are often supported by these government-funded publications like the Globe and Pale. So he goes on to do a hit job on this man in his article. You can go in there and read it for yourself because this entire article is nothing but a character assassination and barely even deals with the news. This is not a news piece. This is a far left opinion piece by Gary Mason. Let's go to this Edmonton Journal. Now, the Edmonton Journal here covered the story. Now, these are all stories around the same time here, right? Around the end of July. The Edmonton Journal was the only paper that actually covered this objectively. Good job, Edmonton Journal. I don't even need to go in there and read anything because it's actually just the facts. It's as if somebody actually went to journalism school and wrote this. Probably doesn't have a job anymore because, he doesn't have a slant. Now let's go to a True North article here. This is the man's lawyer here, Leighton Gray, Parker's lawyer. He's participated not only in Parker's interviews, but also sat through 6 interviews with other people who have worked with Take Back Alberta. I would describe all of these as basically fishing expeditions. They really don't know what they are looking for. They're hoping to find something, said Gray. Elections Alberta has an interest in David Parker personally, and in some sort of ad hominem way, they are looking to find something because they see him as an opponent. That's quite an interesting take by the lawyer, that Elections Alberta is not concerned now just with holding elections. They are concerned with people voting a certain way. All right. My impression from looking at Elections Alberta people is that they weren't very happy about that. And I think that jail thing was a very key piece of it. Well, and that answers the question whether Alberta elections is actually neutral or objective, because they actually thought that they had the power to jail this man. Oh, he's not giving us the receipts and he might be interfering with elections because that's our narrative. And if you don't give us the receipts, we want you in jail. Wow. Talk about fatheads. Talk about power going to your head. Who do these people think they are? Demanding people be arrested, thrown in jail for daring to question how Elections Alberta is doing their job as people hired by the people. I think they forget that. When you're working in the government or you're working for the people, you're working for the people. You're not building a little empire there, people. Right. Next story. The Tyee. Right. Why did I bring this up? Okay. Documents sought by Elections Alberta include records of funds raised at TBA's 2022 annual general meeting, invoices for expenses at town hall meetings organized by a group throughout small town Alberta, receipts for advertising and records related to a TBA dog and pony show that featured Jordan Peterson, inspiration to a generation of Canadian incels. Wow. Talk about your far left narrative. You're going to be calling Canadians names just because they have a specific political affiliation with common sense and would gladly engage in any debate with somebody on the other side of the political aisle, are constantly targeted, being called names, character assassination of any kind. And why do they do this? Because they have no substance to their argument. They have no substance to their argument. But the left eats it up like candy. Eats it up like candy because that is their go-to thing. There's only so many things a liberal or an NDP dipper or anyone on the far left can go to. They have a well that they go to for their ideas. And that well only has some very specific ideas in there. And that well is not open to new ideas. Unless, of course, that new idea is a new crisis narrative. So that's everything that was happening at the time, and that is now coming to the forefront with these fines. And why? Why is the left and all their enablers so afraid of him? Well, maybe it's because of this message that he repeats often enough, and that was said here 2 years ago. We'll come back right after this clip.
Because here's the truth. 42% of every dollar you make in this country goes to taxes right now. It might even be more. And that is more than the average amount you spend on food, shelter, and transportation. Right? They're taxing us to death to feed their socialist ways. Okay? AHS. Right? $3 billion they were given to get more capacity. And what happened? They fired 10% of their workforce and had less capacity. But don't forget, Hinshaw got a bonus. Right? A big one. They're getting bonuses, and those things are being decided by people that are going to boring meetings and sitting there and voting. That's it. That's how everything is decided in this system that was passed down to us by our ancestors. It's not money that makes decisions here. It's just the people who show up. But guess what? We don't show up. We're too busy. Our families are too important. Our vacations are too important. Our passions are too important. Our hobbies are too important. And we don't show up. And now a small fringe minority with unacceptable views has taken over our institutions. Right? They're teaching that you can change your sex. Let's be clear here, not your gender. They're saying that you can become something other than what you are. That you can imagine a reality into existence. Okay? They are making us treat our elderly as if they are such a burden that we should just put them in the little prisons and let them die alone. That is not the human way. The human way has always been to live with our parents while they age and die. That has always been the human way. And in most of the world, that's still the human right. Not here, though. They're too much of a burden. Now, what's the worst thing that we're doing? We're slaughtering our young in the womb. And I don't care whether you're pro-life or pro-choice. That's what's happening. Right? Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, our progeny are being slaughtered in the womb. That's what's happening. A species that will not even reproduce will not survive. The birth rate of North America is not replacement. The human birth rate. China is on a collision course with reality. They have an inverted democratic pyramid, which means they have way more old people than young people, almost 2 to 1 eventually. You know what happens then? Those young people are slaves to preserving the comfort of the old until they die.
As you can see, doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, there will always be people with their hands in the cookie jar if they're not being watched. And why is that? Why has society changed so much? Why does it now seem to be that a lot of people are losing faith in Elections Canada and other elections across this great nation? Recently in BC, there was a lot of shenanigans going on there with voting within the province. And now we see a lot of recounts, apparently not as the same amount of recounts as they had in the last election. They just seem to be a little more weird this time, especially when you go back through and you count up ballots that were previously discounted for being invalid and all of a sudden are revalidated when judges go through them. Why is that? Is it because there's no scrutineers? Are scrutineers even allowed to be there? Apparently they are. It's obvious that there's more work that needs to be done. But really, why is everyone so afraid of Peter? Why? It's not even his name, is it? It's fucking David. Motherfucker. But why is everyone so afraid of David? What message makes him so dangerous that Alberta elections had to go after him with these fines while ignoring virtually everyone else employed in the same thing during an election? You make it sound like if anyone says anything in preference to a specific candidate at any event that wasn't actually scheduled by a financed official third party during an election, you can be held liable and criminal. Well, if that was the case, then why isn't that happening to the press? Who are obviously biased during an election, holding their own news events. Well, perhaps it's because of the message that David is saying here. And it's a message that I have been saying my entire life. I've said it often enough on this channel. Why was only 40%? Why were 40% of Canadians not voting? Now down to maybe 35% from the federal election. Why are so many people apathetic? Why are they not? Well, now you've seen what has happened, right? Corruption at its worst at every level, to the point whereby elections organizations run by the government are now deciding who is allowed to say something during an election and who is not. This country is going to hell in a handbasket. So let's listen to David as we close out this episode and hear his message. And if it says something to you, then maybe at the next election, participate. But you don't need to wait until the next election. I think a lot of people need to start participating now because things are not looking good. And the people in charge only want one thing. And that's not to take care of you, Canadians. It's to hold on to power. Thanks for coming out to Occam's Razor. Please like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys. And girls.